Good morning everyone. Welcome to our first ever Insights webinar. I'm Chantel, I'm one of the consultants here at AVEC Partnership. Also on the call with me today, I've got Carol, who specialises in project management and academy conversions, and Deborah Fox, Director of Education at Diocese of Hexham. The main reason we've put this webinar together really today is we wanted to share our experience and expertise with you for those looking to form multi-academy trusts or looking to grow trusts, or perhaps have already started their journey and are just interested. We've got a mixture of diocesan trust and school leaders here with us today, so I hope that you all find the session interesting and worthwhile. Before I hand you over to our speakers, just give you a little bit of background about us. So here at AVEC, we formed back in 2010. So it's been around 11 years since we did our first academy conversion. We then joined the EPM group back in 2019 and now collectively support over 2,500 schools and trusts across the country. We're at the forefront of supporting schools, trusts and dioceses in not only forming their MATs and helping them with their trust mergers, but also supporting their HR, governance, health and safety, payroll and finance needs. If you do have any questions today, please feel free to put them in the chat facility and we'll be sure to cover these at the end. I'll now hand you over to Carol.
Thanks, Chantel. Hi everyone, pleased to meet you. My name's Carol Barclay and I'm one of the senior partners here at AVEC Partnership. I actually head up the finance team, and along with a number of my colleagues, I also specialise in project management of academy conversions. I'm delighted to be here today to join with Deborah Fox, Diocesan Director at Hexham and Newcastle, to share with you our experiences of establishing and expanding multi-academy trusts in a diocese. Working closely with a number of diocesan colleagues, myself and my colleagues have developed a deep understanding of MATs, especially in the Catholic sector. We're currently working closely with Deborah and her team as they continue with their journey of MAT development. During today's session, Deborah will walk us through the vision of the Bishop, giving us some context around policy and the plan for MAT growth. She'll also give us a useful insight into the challenges faced by her and her team, along with the opportunities which have been created. She will talk about how we've worked with her to roll out diocesan policy and focus on some helpful learning points. I'll then talk through the principles of MAT growth and advise how we may be able to help you with that journey. I would hope our top 10 tips would be able to be helpful to you as you move forward with your own plans. So without further delay, I'm delighted to introduce you to the Director of Education for the Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle, Deborah Fox.
Sorry, rookie error. It's great to be here today. I hope that sharing my journey through academisation is going to be helpful to you. Obviously, it's what we've done in Hexham Newcastle, but I think some of it might be relevant and pertinent to you. So Carol's already covered what I'm generally going to cover this morning. Just really our story and where we started from, where we've come to, and where we're going to go with our MAT development. I think we'll start with some context. So the next slide, please. This is our Catholic Diocese, Hexham Newcastle. Just so you know where we are geographically, we're in the northeast of England. We stretch from Berwick-upon-Tweed in the north. We have one little first school up in Berwick-upon-Tweed and down as far as Stockton-upon-Tees and across to Hexham. You can see it's quite varied area. There's little urban areas and some rural areas and also some areas of significant deprivation. If you think of Billy Elliot, that area is in our diocese, you know, former mining communities and so on, and we cover 10 local authority areas. And then a few photographs to show. There's our bishop, Bishop Robert Byrne. He's been our bishop for just over 2 years. Top right, there's St Mary's Cathedral, which is our Catholic cathedral in Newcastle. If you get off the train station, it's at Newcastle Central Station. It's directly opposite. It's definitely worth a visit. It's a gorgeous cathedral. You can see the riverscape of the Tyne Bridge and the Millennium Bridge and the Sage, and Holy Island, and there's the Angel of the North, which is actually not in Newcastle, it is in Gateshead. Being a Gateshead girl, I feel I need to say that. That's generally where we are. Our statistics, we have 156 diocesan schools, 20 of them are secondary, the rest are mainly primary. We have 53,600 pupils, and we're the 6th largest diocese out of 22 in England and Wales. Teaching schools are changing, as we know, and we'll have one teaching hub from September. But you'll see we've got good capacity in our diocese amongst our schools, because we have 9 secondary schools that are teaching schools and also 4 primary teaching schools. Statistically, with Ofsted, we've got really good statistics, higher than national and also higher than local for primary and secondary. Although we do know that does not necessarily reflect the reality of what's happening in schools, but that's a headline figure. And we have one school in special measures, which we're hoping is going to be inspected this term, because we're hoping that would come out of that. It certainly would deserve to. Okay, it's important, I think, just to give some context, really, and this is the Catholic context, because I'm aware that we've got a mixed group here this morning. I think Catholic schools are quite different in this way. In canon law, Catholic schools come under the jurisdiction of the diocesan bishop. He appoints foundation governors, and they're practicing Catholics who are appointed by him to represent his views on the governing body, and they're always in the majority of 2. The bishop can direct his foundation governors. In our process of moving through academisation, the bishop has not used that power. He's used his expectation. But I think it's important, because what we've managed to achieve, I think that context is relevant, because that strong expectation and the idea that foundation governors represent the bishop's views, you'll see how we've managed to get this project moving forward. It wasn't just winning hearts and minds. Thank you. Okay, so just a little bit of background to where we've come from. Our first conversion started in 2011. That was a high school that went first. The growth was mainly amongst secondary schools, and there was very little interest in the primary sector. And I know that's, reflection of what's happened nationally. In between 2016 and 17, we had a long consultation. That was in the context of, you remember, the white paper when schools were going to be academies by 2020. So we had a long period of consultation. In that, if you remember, during that time, the government then changed their mind. And so what we ended up with the policy in June 2017, I suppose, lacked teeth because of that. The MAT growth that happened at that point was really largely about taking in and helping vulnerable schools. Up till 2017, therefore, when a secondary school converted, they were encouraged to convert as a MAT and not a single academy trust, in case a school got into difficulty and they could provide a safe haven. This led to a number of empty MATs, as I would call them, which is one school in there. There was some positive growth from 2018 to 19. I became Director of Education in January 2018, and I saw that the June 2017 policy wasn't working, so I did do a lot of encouragement, and there was some positive growth there, but it was very time consuming, and it wasn't as many schools as we would have liked. So in 2019 in December, we revised the policy. So the academy policy of 2017, as I said, lacked teeth. It wasn't a strategic plan. It was a local growth evolving model. So very much, if you want to, you can. And if you want to get together with a group of schools, we'll facilitate. But the diocese took a very neutral stance and no timescale was set. As I said, I actively encouraged primary conversions during 2018, and so that led to, by the time we got to the 1st of October 2019, 45 of our 156 schools were academies, but we were a bit messy because we had 13 MATs, some of them were empty, and we had 2 single academy trusts. We did have 1 MAT of 3 primary schools, and that seemed to be fine at first, but then that lacked capacity, and that was very obvious at that point. 19 out of the 20 secondary schools were academies, and 1 was on the way, but only 26 out of the others, out of the 136, were academies. So a review. Why did we want a review? Well, the growth wasn't happening as anticipated. So the local growth evolving model was very much feeling that, oh, the family of schools will get together. The family of primary schools with the high school, they will grow as a trust. Then eventually the trusts will join together, and eventually we'll have large trusts. It wasn't happening. I was also really concerned about the changes in the educational landscape. The reduced capacities of local authorities was having a significant impact on our schools, particularly with standards. Schools were facing financial problems, and also in the particular Catholic context, we have difficulty finding school leaders. There were issues with governance. So right across the piece, we were finding that schools were becoming more vulnerable. There was also dissatisfaction with the policy. We had people at polar opposites. Some people were saying, our school wants to convert, but we don't know where to go. You haven't told us, we need direction. At the other end of the scale, we had people, over my dead body, will our school become an academy? And we had everything in between. So the policy just was not fit for purpose, and that's why we needed to change it and review it. What we did was go right back to why should we have an academy policy? Well, when we were looking at rewriting it, it had been very much left up to self-determination of a school up till then, and it wasn't diocesan-led or diocesan-driven. So we went right back to say, well, what are we trying to achieve? And the reason why a large driver was about promotion, protection, preservation and future development of Catholic education in our diocese. And there was very much, we're trying to engender that feeling of we've received this wonderful legacy from the people who went before us. We are stewards of this, and we have a responsibility to pass this on. We need to make sure that the children have the best educational opportunities and life-fulfilling experiences with the teachings of Christ at the centre. We want high-quality teaching. We need to make sure that the Catholic mission is strengthened, that school-to-school support is enhanced and provision is improved. We were really keen that no school would become isolated or vulnerable in a rapidly changing environment. Our schools are quite small schools, so compared with nationally. So I think we have 3 schools that are 2 form entry primary schools. The rest are all single form entry or smaller. So they were quite vulnerable in this changing environment. We also very much reminded people and put it in our documentation, this idea of diocesan family, that interdependence, that importance of sticking together. So what was our diocesan policy of 2019? Well, we went to aiming to have large mats right at the outset, but not have the growth model of smaller mats growing together and merging. We decided it was actually look at the end point. We want 4 large mats. How do we get there? And the reason why we went for large mats, we could see that it was becoming obvious that the way of addressing educational standards and having capacity would be within larger trusts. That they would be able to bring about that significant educational improvement, that they would be able to make financial savings through economies of scale, and also they could be really take hold of the issues about leadership development, about CPD, about talent spotting, succession planning, and so on. So we chose 4. We created 4 academy regions, and within each region we chose 1 existing trust to grow. And you'll see the size of our trusts, so 39, 35, 34 and 48. So they are of a significant size, or will be when we eventually get there. We came up with a timescale where there were 2 parts to this. The first part was that all existing academies would be consolidated into one of the formats by July 2022, and that all of the VA schools would become academies by July 2020 for the consolidation, and by July 2022 for the other conversions. We chose those trusts. We renamed them as Catholic Education Trusts. We wanted to keep the word trust because we felt it means something more, and certainly in our setting it felt something more. So we definitely wanted to keep the word trust, and we wanted to have Catholic in there as well. And we've named them after the 4 of the founding bishops of the diocese: Bishop Buick, Bishop Chadwick, Bishop Hogarth and Bishop Wilkinson. I said we had 13 mats and 2 SATs, and quite honestly, the trust governance was a bit of a mess. There were different members for all of the different academies and trusts. There wasn't a consistency about trust boards and so on. So we brought some consistency to the piece. So the 5 members of all of our 4 trusts, or as you can see, Bishop, Vicar General, Episcopal Vicar for Education, Director of Education and Diocesan Financial Secretary. So, and we all sit on a diocesan board of education. On each trust, there are foundation directors, so they're practicing Catholics appointed by the bishop. We also have non-foundation directors, so they are people who are not practicing Catholics, but their appointment is approved by the bishop. So we didn't want to just confine that group to Catholic people. We want to have a broader spread of expertise, but they're always in the foundation are always in the majority of 2. And then in each school's governing committee, there's a head teacher, up to 1 staff, up to 1 parent, and again the foundation governors, but they're in the majority of 2. Something that was key to moving forward as well and tidying up the situation was the Diocesan Academy documentation. Up till when we had the 13 MATs and the 2 SATs, every single one had a different version of the Articles of Association, and they also had different schemes of delegation for those who had more than 1 school in the trust. So we worked to produce a single Articles of Association that all 4 trusts would adopt. That was based on the February 2019 model. We came up with the diocesan scheme of delegation, and we worked with the trusts on developing that. We have a diocesan memorandum of understanding that was first written in 2012 when schools were first converting, and that unpicks the relationship of the diocese with the academy. This has been updated in January 2020 to have much more detail about the relationships with trusts and individual schools as well within the trusts. We've adopted the Catholic Education Service diocesan protocols, and that's very much about the expectations of what the schools are required to do, how they're expected to function. It reflects the jurisdiction and the responsibility of the bishop, and it has certain expectations with regard to things like admissions and buildings, etc. We also produced a comprehensive frequently asked questions document. I'd spent a long time from January 2018 until the end of 19. I'd spent a lot of time engaging with different groups, with governors, with staff, with head teachers, listening, having dialogue, and we captured all of the anxieties and worries and concerns and questions that people came up with, and that was helpful. That informed quite a comprehensive FAQs document. We've had good feedback from that. Not everybody reads it, of course, but those who've read it, we've had good feedback about that. One of the things we've done quite recently, and you might find this interesting, is we've produced a single model budget setting, monitoring and reserves policy. Now, actually, that responsibility for that does not lie with the diocese, but we took the initiative to write that in consultation with the 4 trusts. And one of the reasons we did that was we were concerned about primary schools had this idea of, are they going to be asset stripped when they go into the trust? So in order to address that, we made sure that the model policy is that they wouldn't be. My background is primary headship, and I know how sometimes primary heads would think. We were worried that if we didn't make sure that they weren't asset stripped, then they might just go on a spending spree. So if they had £100,000 carry forward, that might disappear before they go into the trust, and that's no good for anybody. So there's something that we produced, and again, we've got good relationships with the trust, so they have adopted that policy. The consolidation of the 4 trusts, when we had to choose a base MAT, we didn't create new MATs, we chose one in each area to grow. And how we chose it, we had to be very transparent about this. And so we came up with a list of criteria. So first of all, we were looking, well, what's the size of the trust? How many secondary schools are in there? Is it cross-phase? Is there evidence of effective school-to-school support? Is there an established provision of central services and a central services team? And also, crucially, at that time, you'll remember, in that period of autumn 19, the TCAF funding was announced, and the DFE came up with the grading, so we also took into account that. Crucially, you'll see that important red circle in the centre. The CEO stayed as CEO of that MAT, and that was quite contentious with some people, because they thought that the CEO should be removed and an advert put out for the CEO. We saw it very much that we weren't choosing the CEO as an individual, we were choosing the trust that had the most capacity and track record, that had the potential to develop into one of these very large trusts. The CEO, by definition, was part of that story. And so it sat comfortably with us that the CEO was the person who was in the job, and they would keep their job. So the trust growth part of the plan, we came up with the trust growth plan for each of the 4 trusts, and we named all schools in it up till July 2022. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet, and when we were putting that together, we consulted the schools about where in the plan they would like to be. What we did say is you can't all go at once and you can't all go at the end. We were worried that everyone would say, well, we want to go in July 2022 at the end. And we say, well, that can't happen. It has to be spread out. We did listen to them and listen to their views on that. Willingness was a factor. So if, you know, we picked up some schools were very, very unwilling. So, well, we won't force the issue. We'll put you later in the plan, by which time more schools who want to convert will have moved forward. We had to take into account with the plan for the capacity of the Regional Schools Commission, the Head Teacher Board and their meetings, the Dyson Board of Education meetings, because obviously no conversion can happen without conditional consent from the diocese. Target conversion date. We took into account the financial situation of schools, whether they really needed to get in sooner rather than later, or equally, if they were in a position where they were running a deficit budget and it was because of overstaffing, we would put them later because they really needed to sort that out before going into the trust. So all of those factors we took into account. The local authority capacity has been a significant influence on that plan. For example, Durham Local Authority, when we engaged with each local authority and said, how many conversions can you cope with at a time? Because that's going to inform the plan. Originally, Durham said we can do 5 per quarter, so that was fine. But then they said, actually, we can only do 3, and we had to go back and readjust our plan. That was quite complex for us because Durham schools feed into 3 of our trusts. So not only do we have to have a linear progression trust growth plan, it also had to be across trusts as well, with feeding in from the same local authority. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so diocesan support. So what have we done? From the very outset, I was really keen to show, and the narrative was that the diocese was the driver of this and not the trust, because in the past, trusts had been accused by primary school heads often of saying, oh, you know, your empire building, they want to take us over, they want to dominate. So we're very much saying, no, the trusts are acting at the behest of the diocese. It's a diocesan policy. You know, if they didn't choose to grow to 34, 35, 39 and 48 schools, we are saying they have to. We also employed a designated academy officer, and she took a post with us last summer from AVEC. We realised that it was almost killing me, to be honest, trying to do all of the academy work as well as all of my other work. And we really knew we needed capacity in our team. And we did think about employing somebody full time to do it. The problem with that would have been I would have had to spend time training the person. I wasn't confident I would find someone who had any experience of academisation at all. So I spoke to, we have a COO in the diocese. We had long discussions about that, and we decided the best thing to do was to go to where an expert was. So we approached AVEC. Could they provide a person for, I sent the job description of what we were thinking, and what they came back and said, I don't think you need a full-time person, we think you need a 2 days a week specialist. And that's what we did, and that has been an absolute godsend. It's been absolutely crucial to the success of the whole project, actually, because she's excellent. And also at the outset I was concerned, well, can there be an ethical wall, because AVEC were also doing project management for the trust, and that's been absolutely fine. It's been absolute clarity about that. So having someone who's going to do negotiation between, you know, the DFE, between the local authorities, with the diocesan solicitors, the trust solicitors, the Diocesan Board of Education, it's taken tremendous pressure off me, and it's brought a real specialism to the team. The diocese, as I said, there was an expectation that the trust would use AVEC for project management. We made that quite clear from the beginning, because this was a significantly ambitious strategic plan, and we knew it needed careful handling. There was one trust who was a bit reticent about that, but actually they were project managing 2 of their conversions, and they got very complicated, and I think they very soon realised that they did need that professional support from AVEC to handle the project. So all I can say is very, very positive messages about AVEC, in my experience, has been really an excellent path for us to follow. The Dyson Building Surveyor, we expanded our team there to try and get ahead, identifying land and building issues that could potentially hold up conversions. And the diocese also given extra capital investment of £2.1 million just to, I suppose, try and smooth the way. So identifying conditions of buildings, what would potentially hold up conversions, and getting that work done. We have actively engaged with the trusts and the schools from start to finish, and I've had countless meetings with individuals and chairs of governors and groups of governors and so on. We communicated, this was in December just gone, we communicated an expectation that all VA schools need to share their capital and financial information with the trusts, no matter where they are on the plan, because it's really important. It came to us that the trust does need to know in advance what the liabilities are that they're taking on. And then we would try and facilitate any changes that need to make before the school goes into the trust. I've already mentioned potential redundancies, and that's been really useful, or giving capital investment where it's needed, and also to avoid major changes without engagement with the trust. Don't take on a 5-year photocopying contract because that's not going to be helpful with when we're moving into the trust. Okay, thanks. Okay, challenges. Well, the capacity in our department has been a big challenge. There's working at the sort of work I do. There's myself, and I have Lucy, who's deputy director, and we're very, very busy. With the 6th biggest diocese, we haven't got a huge number of staff for that size, so our capacity has really been stretched with this. Even with the excellent work, the excellent support from the officer from AVEC who works with us, it still takes up a lot of time. Winning hearts and minds of governors and primary heads. I said at the beginning that the bishop has foundation governors who he appoints to represent his views in the governing body. That doesn't always happen, because the governors will think this is our school and we have to look after this and we're fine and we don't need it, and that school down the road can convert but we don't want to. So winning the hearts and minds, persuading people and communicating that expectation of the bishop has been very challenging and draining, to be honest, because it's very repetitive and there's lots of misconceptions. No matter what we say, there are still there. Local authorities' relationships and attitudes has been a challenge. From the very outset, I was very clear to engage with the local authorities, give them a direction of travel, that we're going to large trusts, that they could be looking at their SLAs and what they offer to try and adapt. But I think it's been unpopular. Definitely, I'll say that the project has been unpopular with some of the local authorities. I had one corporate director of Adult and Children's Services, who had formerly been a director of education in a different local authority, moved to the new local authority, and the first thing he did was send a letter to all Catholic schools to say, you don't have to academise. So that was not helpful. It wasn't actually correct either. So again, that was, in spite of that, I've really tried to maintain good relationships with all of the local authorities. One local authority corporate director wrote to me in March 2020, because we'd made a decision to continue the conversions during COVID, that we adapted what we did, and we had to move to Zoom and so on and adapt the process, but we didn't want to stop the plan and halt the plan. And in hindsight, that's exactly the right decision. But I did have a corporate director write and say, how are you doing this when people are dying? And that's quite emotive sort of language to use. And sadly, in life, we all know as human beings, people do die, and it's desperately sad. But we have to keep the education of our children at the forefront. And that was what, as an absolute key to this academy policy, making sure that education, the best possible education for all of our children. The capacity of the local authorities has impacted on the plan, which I've already referred to. Very little funding for our project. We didn't have successes with TCAF, so the consolidation of the trusts cost the trusts money. And then I've mentioned some of the other issues. Limited examples of successful Catholic trusts. That was really hard. I was almost selling the emperor's new clothes, because we're saying it's going to be wonderful. This is going to happen. We're going to be able to do this. But it could have sounded like a pipe dream. So that was quite challenging. We have some local resistance. We're probably down to approximately 4 schools who are quite entrenched about not wanting to convert. So I think we've done quite well with winning hearts and minds. So successes and opportunities, that shared vision, which I mentioned at the very beginning, is in the trusts, and it's each trust is developing their own vision. I have excellent engagement with the CEOs. We meet regularly, between fortnightly to monthly, really good work together, good strategic work, and also the COOs. There's great sharing of good practice. The support for communities and schools during COVID has been wonderful, and the trusts have been supporting schools that are not yet in the trust. There's a real feeling of family spirit within the trusts and so on. We've had great innovations with curriculum development. We've had some really good work done on transition. That's all continuing. Sharing of good practice within the trusts and across the leadership teams has been really good. And that peer support and challenge, it has got teeth, what they're doing, but it's done in a family supportive way. The financial savings have been considerable. The local authority SLAs were costing the schools considerably more than the contribution they need to make for the equivalent to the trusts. So in a couple of our local authorities, they're about 12% of revenue budget going on SLAs. Our target for that equivalent in the trust is 5 to 6%. So again, money that can go to the education of the children rather than not. And I was really heartened last night, actually. So at a governor's briefing, and a couple of governors contributed and said it's been fantastic since they moved into the trust, not only better value but better quality of provision, which is wonderful to see and hear. And Ellie did cry with relief. Vulnerable schools supported and challenged. Any school that becomes vulnerable, we go to, whether they're in the, well, they're not in the trust, the ones that are not in the trust yet, we go to the trust for the capacity and support. That's working really well. We're working on doing exciting work on leadership development and succession planning. And you might have, I'll give a shout out for Bishop Hogarth, one of our trusts, because Gavin Williamson's speech recently, he talked about, he said it's no longer viable for schools to be single entities. The pandemic has shown us that a school that stands alone is often a weaker school. What is needed is the safety net of a strong family, and the best family is an academy trust. And he mentioned Bishop Hogarth especially as really stepping up with remote learning, support for vulnerable pupils and so on. I'm very proud to say that he could have mentioned any 4 of our trusts in that speech. Thank you. Okay, so key learning points. And this is a bit of, maybe I'm pleased I did and I wish I had. The impact of managing such a strategic change has had a significant impact. It actually has taken so much of my time away from other work that I need to be doing. And to be honest, it's been quite exhausting. I feel we're coming out the other side because we now have 89 of our 156 schools converted, and by the 1st of July we should have 100 out of the 156. So we'll be almost 2/3 of the way there, with the other third converting next year. To do this, if you're leading it, confidence and resilience is really important, as well as knowledge, but confidence and resilience is really important because, I said the diocese was shown to be that this is diocesan policy, not the trust driving it. It has generated, complaints, lots of letters, and that can be quite challenging to deal with. But luckily, I'm quite a resilient person. The appointing an officer to coordinate the academy conversions, I can't stress how important that was. It was really helpful having that professional knowledge, and also the professional trust management that AVEC have coped with. It especially becomes clear when there's slippage, when things don't go to plan, and they're there to give that professional view, to keep the coordination, to keep the momentum going, and to deal with all those stakeholders. The documentation, I wish I'd completed it before we set sail, because we actually finally signed it off in January 2020, but when we were selling this as the new policy, we didn't have it already, so I wish we had. So that would be a recommendation, but also people don't read it. So don't just, I think I've assumed people would read the documentation. They don't always, for whatever reason. Selling that vision of the large Catholic trust, yet to be realised, was challenging. But this is why I was so heartened last night when those governors started saying, in reality, they can see benefits. Moral arguments don't necessarily appeal. So when I'm saying this is about the preservation of Catholic education, and we as stewards have a responsibility, and it's for future generations of children, I've still had governors saying, but our school's fine. Yeah, but some schools are vulnerable. Yes, but our school's fine. But vulnerable schools need support within the trust. Well, we help schools. And I think there's a whole shift in culture and view about what it does mean to be a school that is supporting another school. It's not just to pick up the phone and listening and giving counselling. Within the structure of the trust, it can be organised and effective. Schools' allegiance to local authority, and sometimes I will use the term a blind allegiance, because sometimes the capacity is greatly reduced and the amount of support that schools can have received can really reduce, but some schools are still hanging on to wanting to be a maintained school by the local authority. Communication, using the narrative, setting the narrative, and the use of language has been really important to me. Having that consistency, knowing it's almost a mantra, and making sure that everyone in my team has used the same approach as well. I think that's really important. So just to wind up, really, just to say that this has been a really ambitious project. I think if I looked back, would I have been as brave setting out in it in December 19? I didn't know what was going to happen and how challenging it was going to be. I do have absolute conviction that we're doing the right thing, and we will get there. And we're now seeing it all come to fruition, and to see the very, very many benefits that there are for the children in our schools, for the staff, and also for Catholic education in our diocese. Thank you.
Deborah, you so much for that honest, interest and insight in the journey. Is that a bit echo? I think that's better. Thank you. Yeah, thanks ever so much, especially for your honesty there. It's really enlightening to see that there are pros and absolutely cons, and the things that you wish you'd done a bit earlier. Thanks very much. And if anyone on the call has got any questions for Deborah, please just put them into the chat, and we'll try and pick them up at the end. So from an EVEC and EPM perspective then, we've obviously been delighted to have been working alongside Deborah and her colleagues as the diocese rolls out their ambitious growth plan. And as such, as project managers, we're managing a large number of stakeholders where we've engaged with, over the diocesan area, 10 local authorities, DFE and Regional School Commissioner, Head Teacher Board colleagues, the 4 CEOs and senior leaders from the schools that are moving into the trust. I think important to mention, as mentioned by Deborah, actually, at the time when the direction of travel from government, and Gavin Williamson's speech was key with this, ideally by 2025, 100% of pupils in England will study in academies. And there's certainly been some indications as well from regional schools commissioners that single academy trusts should start looking to merge. We actually believe that there are a number of key considerations to be made when you're either setting up your diocesan MAT or indeed expanding a MAT that's already in existence in your diocese. So what we did a long time ago now is design and then try and test an 8-point approach to MAT development. And we would obviously be delighted to discuss this further with you. But on this slide, I'll just walk you through it, and it includes 8 key points. So planning an appropriate consultation period, and this includes identifying your stakeholders. Obviously, key are your parents and your staff, main group of stakeholders, but it's really wider than that. You need to consider anyone who has an interest in the plan to move schools across to being academies as part of a multi-academy trust. So really important is to draft those consultation documents and make them as transparent and as full of information as you can. And then what we do in our model, we actually produce a detailed report on consultation for key parties. So that allows governing bodies to look at the results of consultation and make decisions moving forward. A copy goes to the diocese, a copy goes to the DFE, and ultimately to the head teacher board. And we believe that consultation piece is really of the utmost importance. In terms of trust transfer and closure then, like Deborah mentioned, it could be that in your own diocesan area you have a number of already established trusts. Our advice around this part would be to ensure this merger of trusts is organised and is done in a sensitive and well managed manner, considering this harmonisation that needs to be in place post-transfer, and in particular need to be aware that there could well be sensitive staffing issues which need careful management. For example, if you've got an existing trust, there could already be a CEO, a COO or a CFO in post, and if that trust is going to close, then need to be really careful with HR processes, and they need to be tight, timely and really sensitive around that piece. Due diligence is extremely important. So regardless of whether you're joining schools or academies with academies, it's absolutely crucial that detailed information is shared. And the purpose of this is really to ensure that there's no nasty surprises uncovered post-transfer or post-academy conversion. And really what I would say is it may be that you need external professionals as experts, I guess, to undertake this work in order to offer that independent piece. So, for example, HR, finance, health and safety professionals should undertake what I would call a deep dive of all relevant information and best practice, and then as a result, I would suggest a triangulated comprehensive report of all of those issues should be brought together, presented to the board of directors, clearly highlighting any risks or any items that require immediate attention. And in the case of closing trusts, transferring into another trust, obviously there's no indemnities available, unlike when a maintained school converts and a local authority could provide certain indemnities. So with trust mergers, I guess it's even more important for that due diligence to happen, because there's nowhere that you're going to have indemnities, and all of the trusts will remain, all of the risks will remain with the trust. From an HR perspective, really important to develop that robust model in terms of the TUPE process, incorporating the issues identified through that due diligence exercise. And we firmly believe, going back to initial consultation and then TUPE consultation, that open and transparent and timely information sharing goes a long way to allay staff anxieties. So typically those anxieties around length of service, pension rights, etc., if they're brought to the table at the beginning of the process, then by the time you get to your formal TUPE, a lot of those anxious mindsets of people should and could have fallen away during the process. In terms of governance, really important to recognise that those three levels, member, trustee and governors, have the skills and expertise, because it's really important, and those skills and expertise levels will inform the future success of your trust potentially. And it may be that training, skills audits, assistance with drafting the key documents, like Deborah mentioned, the scheme of delegation, or indeed terms of reference for committees of your board is required. DFE, as part of the application, will want to approve the board composition through that process, so it's really important to get those skills right and the right people at the right level. From a financial perspective, those of you who already work in academy trusts will probably appreciate that the main changes to day-to-day operations when converting from a school to an academy is probably in the world of finance. It's completely different, and I can say that from experience. It may be that you'll need to procure key services like banks, financial management systems, you might need to change your payroll provider, and you'll certainly need to appoint internal and external auditors. And certainly on our team, all of our finance team are accredited school resource management advisors. So we're also able not just to support with any procurement, but also with the assessment of existing service level agreements. Do they provide value for money, etc.? And should they transfer across into the trust, or potentially should they fall by the wayside at the point of conversion? And finally, on that slide, we really firmly believe that the most efficient multi-academy trusts are those that very quickly in their existence begin to think about, develop and ultimately fully establish an effective central services function. And this service needs to be timely and aligned to the timeline for growth. Okay, so how can we help at AVEC and EPM? Acknowledging that you, as either diocesan, trust or school leaders, should absolutely not shift your main focus from maintaining and improving standards in your schools our team would look to add capacity to your leadership teams, and that's the way we work. We aim to remove some of the organisational and administrative burdens from the process, adding support and expertise, basically from a team of knowledgeable professionals. Our sole aim is to remove the pain and sometimes bureaucratic processes that underpin academy conversion. However, we always acknowledge that this is your process. Obviously, we want to work with you, but we'll do things for you, and you should never feel like that AVEC and APM are doing things to you. It's that partnership arrangement. So examples of how we would do this. Depending on the structure and the approach taken by the diocese and the trusts, there could be a number of legal teams involved. So typically there could be a local authority legal team, a diocesan legal team, one representing the trust, and of course the legal team at the Department of Education. And this can often result in overpowering, confusing levels of email traffic. What we would do is filter as much of that legal jargon and number of emails out of your inboxes, and we would only expose you to the questions that really need your input, i.e. about your diocese, your school or your trust. We always run regular project meetings, and we've a tried and tested information collection strategy which is designed to collate as much information about your organisation as possible from the outset. So it means that we as project managers aren't continually coming back to you. Can you tell us about this? Can you tell us about this? We inform the legal teams, and hopefully that powerful information, which is always expanded with all of the conversions that we're doing, it's tried and tested in that it serves the purpose of DFE, diocesan and legal applications and support. Project timelines always incorporate DFE and other deadlines. Deborah mentioned that some local authorities have capacity issues, so we always have to be careful and make sure that local authority capacity is taken into account when we're plotting a timeline for conversion. And that then informs the risk register, and we always try and flag potential concerns in a timely manner, so hopefully they can all be alleviated during the conversion process. Our HR team is very well versed in helping to manage relationships, and not just managing the TUPE process, but also advising on things like trade union recognition agreements, etc. And finally, on that slide, in line with DFE expectations, we would support you with the drafting of an Equalities Impact Assessment, which ensures that no groups in society would be adversely affected by the creation or development of your multi-academy trust. So, final slide from me then. We've heard from Deborah some very useful and interesting, enlightening even key learning points. Here's a few just top 10 tips from us. So, watch out for opportunities to apply for additional funding. For example, TCAF, Trust Capacity Funding, could be quite key if you're the beginning or even thinking about going down one of these growth journeys. Timing is really key to this funding stream. The window opens and before you know it's closed again. But we do have some really quite successful applications which have gone on, and we've supported some of our clients with applying for funding ranging from £80,000 to £150,000. So it's big, lucrative cash that's available to support the expansion of your mat. So always keep your eye open for that. Identify your own strengths and weaknesses in your trust or your potential trust. For example, do you need to build school improvement capacity? Do you need to strengthen governance? Have you got the breadth of skills and expertise and knowledge actually that you need to move forward? I would say, in terms of everything, communication is the key. Do you need to better articulate what you can offer and the difference that being in a trust can make to your existing schools? Again, we heard from Deborah about the fact that the 4 MATs in her diocesan area are even supporting the schools that aren't in the MAT yet, especially through COVID, and that was what was alluded to by Gavin Williamson. The leadership model is critical. For example, if you're bringing in another trust, is there already a CEO and CFO in situ? And obviously you would need to be able to be in a position to navigate the quite complicated employment issues that could arise from that situation. Just to reiterate again, that deep dive due diligence is vital, particularly around finance and HR. You need to do your homework, and I would say consider bringing in that independent expertise and that added capacity. Of course, your trustees are legally obliged to act responsibly, and especially you do want to avoid those nasty surprises. You need to know what is happening prior to that formal transfer date. There's no point in it all popping up post conversion, and you've got a potential mess to deal with. If you're lucky enough in a trust to have a comfortable level of reserves, you probably should consider securing the agreement of the board to invest some of those reserves in growth with a view to delivering those future benefits and realising those efficiencies in the medium term. Reviewing contracts and services might not be an immediate priority. You'll need to address the ones that are potentially going to fall by the wayside at the point of conversion. But beyond that, it's really important to have an eye on the future because there might be the need to consolidate and consider the balance between external and internal service provision. For example, catering, cleaning, ICT, are they outsourced at the moment? Would it be ideal to bring them in-house? Or it could be the other way. Do you need to outsource? And do you need, if you're relying solely on in-house provision and it's one person, do you need, as the trust grows, to have that support from outside, for example, in the areas of governance, HR and finance? And always remember, from contractual point of view, although we're no longer part of the EU procurement law is now enshrined in UK law, and failure to look at it across the piece, you could very well, if as your trust grows, fall foul of procurement regulations if you're not careful. And finally, from me, getting TUPE wrong can be really quite costly and damaging to the trust's reputation. Potential measures, which might include things like changes to the pay date for staff, should be identified at an early point in the process and communicated to all staff in an open and timely manner. So that's me. Thanks very much for that. If anyone has any questions, then please pop them in the chat, and I'll hand back over to Chantel.
Sorry, again, rookie error, I was muted. Thank you so much, Karen and Deborah. That was really, really insightful. I hope that everyone has found that really interesting today. Again, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat now and get as much out of the session as possible. I'd like to also invite you all to a further event that we have on the 9th of June, where our director Julie Sowerby and Jan Renaud will be approaching the subject of CEO pay and performance. As I said, that will be taking place on Wednesday, the 9th of June. I will send out some further details to you and the recording of this session, of course, but by all means, please do put questions in the chat, or we'll stay on for a couple of minutes and answer them ahead, or by all means, email them to me equally as well. But thanks once again, everyone, for attending today. I hope that you found it informative and insightful.